Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to this first edition of the European AI Forum. I am Gaëlle Pinson, General Manager at Hub Francia, and I'm very glad to be here with you today. The COVID crisis has revealed to the world unprecedented issues, and we believe it challenges European AI more than ever. That is the reason why our three associations organized this European AI Forum. Jan?
Thank you very much, Gaëlle. My name is Jan Stedul. I am welcoming you on behalf of the Croatian AI Association, who was recently formed, and it has around 100 members from entrepreneurs to academia to also well-established organizations so far. The only goal of all of these members is to have Croatia make a remarkable mark and shape the future of the world using advanced technologies just like artificial intelligence. Daniel.
Thank you, Jan. My name is Daniel Abur. I am the General Manager of the German AI Association, and we represent 250 startups and small firms with the focus on AI and machine learning. Gaëlle?
And I'm the General Manager of Hub Francia, which has been accelerating the use of AI among its members, corporate companies, startups, SMEs for almost 3 years. So today we will join our forces and discuss in 3 panels with experts from our different countries. The first panel should help us set priorities for the European AI roadmap in the new post-COVID context. We then decided to focus on 2 aspects we believe are decisive to get European AI going. First, the regulatory framework in panel 2, and then infrastructures in panel 3. We all know at the beginning of the European construction, to secure Europe economically and politically, the European coal and steel community was set up. Well, today it seems we do need a European data and AI community for the same reasons. We hope this European AI Forum will help all stakeholders and citizens see how we can very practically organize the way to a less dependent, more sovereign European AI.
And we are grateful for the participation of you all, like I'm seeing in the chat, from Tel Aviv, from Munich, from Zagreb, from Stuttgart, from Paris, from everyone, from 25 countries in total all over the world, as well as the participation and representatives of the European Commission, of all our government, and we are very happy about this. And this is on a very special day. It's on the last day of the Croatian presidency, and tomorrow the German presidency will begin. And so we hope we draw conclusions from the Croatian presidency and give input to the German one.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us today. I will be moderating a panel soon, the first one up to come, but I would like to tell you that this event will go on for the entirety of the day, all the way until 4 p.m. with some small breaks in between. This is a virtual event, as you all know, so it's technically very challenging. There are 2 things I will immediately ask your forgiveness for in advance. The first one, if we encounter any sort of technical difficulties, please bear with us. And the second one, of course, is me trying to pronounce the French names and surnames. So please also forgive me for that. I'll give you some of the technical information up front. So you will see in your live storm windows that you're in right now, there is under the title European AI Forum and this red live mark, there is a timestamp. If you click on that timestamp, after this session is done, you can switch to all these other sessions. We will have 3 sessions all together, but you will be informed about that later on, and there will be some graphics to show you how to do it. So don't even worry, it's very easy peasy. We will have part of discussion amongst the panelists, and we want you all to join for that as well. So as you can see on the right side of your screen, there is a chat that you can use for chatting amongst yourselves and commenting on my hair or Daniel's looks. And you can also use the questions, which I encourage you to do so while we have the panels, because with all the panelists and all the moderators are aware that they should ask those questions to the panelists. If you see something you would like to use the opportunity to ask some of the genius guys that we have here today, please use that opportunity. And now, without further ado, I'm super proud and very excited to announce a keynote address by the Croatian president, Mr. Zoran Milanović. So please, let's hear what he has to say.
Dear friends, I wish you a warm welcome to the first European Artificial Intelligence Forum held in this virtual forum. You meet today in extreme circumstances. When I was sworn in as the Croatian president on February 18th, it was unimaginable that only a month later, Croatia and most of Europe would be in full lockdown due to the rising number of COVID cases. Within a matter of weeks, the rule changed, and our only option was to adapt to the new normal, notorious new normal. Digital tools became a lifeline for ordering food, for seeing friends and family, for schooling, and for working from home. Most of these digital tools were already available, but countries across Europe were benefiting from them to a varying degree. Tomorrow, on July 1st, Croatia will mark the 7th anniversary since becoming the EU member. Being a part of the EU family means that we build our future together and we assess the risks together. Now more than ever, we need to be inspired by the possibility that artificial intelligence and other digital technologies can bring so that we can reap the benefits of all our investments. I hope this forum today will put ideas on the table that will inspire us, connect us, and keep us moving forward. Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. President, for these kind words of encouragement. Daniel?
Yeah, thank you. It's pretty cool having the Croatian president addressing us. Gael?
Isn't it?
I think the idea that the digital tools become the new normal is interesting, and the pandemic has been an opportunity for this digitization.
We do have another address, don't we, Gael?
Yes, we have the very great honor to have our European Commission's Executive Vice President, Margrethe Vestager.
Ladies and gentlemen, the coronavirus has certainly disrupted a lot of plans this year. If 2020 had been an ordinary year, we would have likely been meeting today. It's nevertheless a pleasure to speak to you about artificial intelligence at the very end of the Croatian presidency. The last few months, they have certainly been the most unusual, the most unsettling environment in which a council presidency had ever had to operate. So I'm glad that you have found a way for this conference to go ahead. And this is possible, of course, because of digitization. The COVID crisis have challenged each and every one of us. Our health and our health systems, our economies, our very personal way of living. It has also been a testbed for digital solutions. As we have had to avoid the physical interaction, digital technology has stepped in and partly filled the gap. It has allowed us to go and to shop online. We have communicated online, worked from home, taught our children from a distance, and followed sports classes on our computers. And that experience is a powerful reminder of just how much digital technology has to offer. Digital technologies are also able to help us deal with the virus itself. Data, in combination with artificial intelligence and supercomputers, are major assets in detecting patterns in the spread of the virus or potential treatments. This is why the European Union has been funding a range of research and innovation actions in the field of AI and health. Some 3 months ago, we also launched an initiative to collect ideas about deployable artificial intelligence and robotic solutions that could help face the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. In response to this call, numerous digital solutions were shared on our website. I'm often asked if all the benefits that digital solutions have brought us during the crisis have changed the Commission's digital policy. Have we been too critical of tech companies, too careful and too bureaucratic when it comes to digital technologies? My answer to this is that our objectives are more relevant than ever. The more we use and depend on digital technologies, the more important it is that these technologies are in tune with our values, our beliefs, our rules. We firmly believe that the great potential that the digital transformation holds for our societies and economies. At the very beginning of this mandate, the Commission identified what we call the twin transitions. This is our main strategic objective, an objective to promote the transition to both a green and a digital economy and society. And this has proven more relevant than ever in our strategy for the recovery after the corona crisis. Together with our proposal for a modern and revamped long-term European budget, we have proposed a new recovery programme, Next Generation EU, as you know it. I think the name for this programme is well chosen. As we suggest borrowing money from our children and grandchildren, we should invest in a way that benefits them. To make our planet greener and to invest in modern technologies that will secure their jobs and their prosperity. And there's a huge economic potential in investing in our digital infrastructures and capabilities. We need first-class connectivity, efficient cloud solutions and computing power in Europe. We need to make sure that the vast amount of data that is created every day, many of which are non-personal data, are made available to innovators and to startups. And we need to invest in research and skills. There's even more to the story. When we adopted our digital strategy back in February, we said that we want to shape Europe's digital future. We want technology to serve a true purpose, to make a difference in people's lives. We want digital technologies to work for each and every one of us. Artificial intelligence is a case in point. If properly developed and used, it can work miracles, both for our economy and for our society. It can help us manage health crises like the current one and predict the next one before any human being. It can help us identify fraudulent transactions on e-commerce marketplaces so that we do not end up buying counterfeit products without knowing it. And it can help us become climate neutral by 2050 by saving energy and waste at any stage of the product cycle. We need to put all our joint effort into developing these European artificial intelligence solutions. But artificial intelligence can also do harm. It can lead to discrimination, amplifying the prejudice and the biases that are already inherent in our society. Women may not be offered a top management job because they have occupied fewer of such jobs in the past than men. Immigration and people belonging to certain ethnical groups might be targeted by predictive policing techniques that direct all the attention of law enforcement to them. This is not acceptable. Artificial intelligence may also alter the behavior of products after we have bought them. If it means that a music streaming services to which I have a subscription recommends a song that I don't like, well, I can live with this. But if my self-driving car takes decision on whose life to spare in case of an accident, I would want greater scrutiny over such decisions. And this is why we said in our white paper on AI that high-risk applications need to be properly regulated, that we need to know that they are technically robust and safe, that they have been trained on reliable data, that somewhere there is a human in the loop. I'm aware, obviously, that it's not an easy thing to define which AI systems are high risks and which are not. For some areas it may be obvious, as an example when AI might be used for mass surveillance purposes. For other areas, this is more difficult. This key question was also one of the key questions raised in our public consultation on the white paper that ended mid-June. Close to 1,200 people or organizations responded to this consultation, which show how much people care about this issue. Most of these contributions agreed that AI, if not properly framed, might compromise our fundamental rights or safety. And many of them agreed with us that we should focus our attention on high-risk applications. But rather few of them were convinced that we had already found the silver bullet that allows us to distinguish between high and low-risk applications. And this is why today's conference is also important. Given that artificial intelligence, one way or another, affects every one of us, we need a thorough debate on how to deal with this technology. We want to develop European AI with clear rules and innovative solutions to boost our economic growth and societal welfare. For this, we need to safeguard our trust in this technology, because without trust, no sustainable progress is possible. And in this spirit, I wish you an inspiring and productive conference.
Well, this was a very precise description of all the issues and the roadmap. I just pick out one keyword, that of trust, and hope that our panels will be a contribution to building this trust from a regulatory point of view with ethics and privacy in panel 2, and also from an infrastructure technical point of view with security of data sharing or certification. What do you think?
Well, we are very happy to see that artificial intelligence is being recognized in our national governments and also in the European Commission. And thank you to Mrs. Vestager for attending our conference about that.
Oh yeah, many thanks to Madam Vestager for being with us today in this forum. Now is the time for us to get ready for our first panel. You will allow us some time to get our panelists on stage. I would just like to remind you again, please do use the questions tab. Please ask any questions you'd like to get answered by our dear esteemed panelists, and I will make sure that you get the answers too. So please hang on. We will be right back with the panel. Thank you very much.
See ya.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to our first panel titled EU's Road to Economic Recovery and the Challenges Put to European AI. I'm very proud to announce the following group of gentlemen. I hope that you will enjoy our discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to present to you Mr. Anthony Whelan, Digital Policy Advisor in the Cabinet of European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. He advises the President on a range of digital issues related to the digital economy. For example, the digital single market, research, innovation, and competition, so a very broad range of topical issues. He was previously the Director for Electronic Communications Networks and Services at the European Commission since 2013, where he designed and negotiated different various EU initiatives. We are very happy you were able to join us. Thank you very much, Mr. Whelan.
Nice to be with you. Thanks.
Thank you. Great to see your microphone works. So next up is Mr. Mate Rimac, a Croatian innovator, entrepreneur, and founder of the Croatian electric car company Rimac Automobili. In 2009, Mate started modeling an electric supercar at the age of 20. He started his car efforts in his garage, growing his company out into several ventures with diverse business models. At just 32 years old, he is already one of the most important figures in the electrification revolution. Dear Mate, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for the invite. Hi, everybody.
Next up is Mr. And now we come to the point of me pronouncing French names and surnames. So please, Mr. Cyril Kabbara, the co-founder of the French startup Shark Robotics. Mr. Kabbara spent 9 years working in intelligence in the French army before studying for a master's degree in economic intelligence in Paris. The company he co-founded, Shark Robotics, has developed a robot named Colossus that has been successfully integrated into the Paris and Marseille fire services and helped save Paris Notre Dame Cathedral when flames engulfed its roof in 2019. Dear Cyril, thank you for joining us here today. And dear Cyril, you are muted. Please unmute yourself. Thank you. Now the microphone works. Thank you, Cyril.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be part of this panel.
Thank you, Cyril. And last but not least, with us today is Mr. Benjamin Benharrosh, co-founder of the French scale-up Delair. Delair was founded in France in 2011, and since then they've largely been known for their work in creating fixed-wing drones for commercial applications, including uses in mapping and surveying, oil and gas, mining, agriculture, construction, and transportation. For years now, Delair has been working to push the boundaries of commercial unmanned flying, making strategic partnerships with companies like Intel and DJI to help push the use of aerial data processing towards actionable insights. Benjamin, thank you very much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hey, everybody.
Great. So the topic is EU's economic recovery and the future of European AI. I think that the title is already hinting somehow in the direction that we here all believe that AI could play a very significant role in that, and that new technologies, entrepreneur culture, and everything else should definitely boost the economy in these difficult times for all of us. I would like to structure the concept of this panel in a way that we get to meet our entrepreneurs, we get to meet our innovators, we hear from them, we hear the stories, the pains, the lessons, and then we have the special ability to talk to Mr. Whelan directly and see if there are any ways of how we could structure this and make more of this happen. And is there any way the EU can help successes like this become more often? So Mate, please, I would like to start with you. You started your supercar company in 2009, and you specialize in the production of all electric hypercars, battery systems that power them. So back then, when you started, Croatia was not even part of the EU. How would you describe your early beginnings, and how would you describe, was there any difference when you started out as an entrepreneur in Croatia that was not part of the EU, and then has anything changed since Croatia became a full member?
Well, it was super difficult to start in a country that never had a car industry. So Croatia, when you type into Google, like automotive industry in Europe, you get dots all over the place, from Portugal to the East European states like Slovakia, Hungary, Slovenia, even Serbia. Croatia is the one with really no automotive industry, and unfortunately just very few technology companies in general. So Croatia didn't have a single venture capital fund at that time. It was super hard to start a company. It was very hard to attract talent or to find talent because there was just nobody who was doing anything like that in Croatia. So it was super difficult to bring the company up. We were on the brink of survival for most of our time until we have proven ourselves step by step with little things and, going slowly, towards, let's say, a success story. And then once it started to take off, when we had the first investors joining us, we went very quickly from 20 people to 100 to 300, now to 700, and continue to grow. The big turning point for us was when we started to work with the big car companies. Porsche invested in us in 2017. That was the first time that they have invested in a company, and just something unimaginable when you look at Croatia 10 years ago, that Porsche would invest in a Croatian tech startup. And then after Porsche, Hyundai and Kia have invested into the company. So we have attracted 150 million euros into the company. We have created the most diverse company in Croatia in terms of nationalities. We are 35 nationalities now. We have proven that in Southeastern Europe, in a country that never had this kind of industry, you can create a global success story. But I mean, we still have a long way to go. And you know, it's much easier since we are in the EU to travel and to work with companies all around Europe. We are a global company. We consider our market to be global. We are just here in Croatia because I happened to start it here. There was no big analysis behind it. I always like to say, like, Ferrari is in Modena because, you know, Enzo Ferrari was there, or Porsche is in Stuttgart because Ferdinand Porsche started there. So that's why we are here, and we kind of made it work.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I think you do say that it was a bit easier going in the EU with the travel. Was there anything else that was maybe better or different since Croatia joined the EU in terms of cooperating with the government or any sort of, you know, government offices?
Yeah, I think the EU is pushing Croatia in the right direction, pushing our legislators and so on. And recently I spent quite some time in Brussels as well, talking with people like Margrethe, who is a great supporter of electrification in general, but also I think quite a big fan of our company. And I have the feeling like, you know, it's always like that. We see it in our company, like, why reinvent the wheel? You know, there's so many people who have done a lot of things, so, you know, consultants can help and so on. And it's the same, I think, with Croatia and the EU, where, you know, some best practices and some, let's say, strategies that have been developed by people who have more experience and who have done this already for decades in their countries. So if Croatia can adapt those best practices and maybe avoid some pitfalls, I think it's benefiting a lot. And I just have the feeling, you know, when you go from Croatia now and cross the border to Serbia, you see that there is a, I don't know, 15 years gap. You can literally see it as soon as you cross the border. And I think Croatia would have looked, I mean, Croatia is very far from being, let's say, EU average. Unfortunately, on most of the rankings, we are in the very bottom. But it would have been much worse, I believe, without the EU.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Benjamin, you started your company in Toulouse, France. Am I right? And
Yes, exactly.
now you're kind of pushing really hard, and you're doing the expansion into the US, Canada, all these other different markets. And I believe you also had the ability or the privilege of being working and studying in the US. How would you describe the difference between US and EU business, let's say, or even legislative things that guideline the business?
Well, that's a very large topic, but yeah, so we started in France, and with a new industry that was at that time the drone industry, which was a very unregulated industry. And we were lucky enough to have like European countries to be the first to regulate this market and to offer the possibility to do what we call today beyond visual line of sight, which means like being able to fly the drone with no limit of distance between the operator on the ground and the flying drone. And that was a very unique capability in the world. And when we tried to sell our technology in the US, we were blocked by this problem of regulation there. So it's been a big issue for several years, and actually it's still an issue now. So there are still a bit, almost 8 years behind in terms of regulation for those capabilities. That being said, I moved to the US 4 years ago to start the US branch, to open the office and see how we could expand the business. And even without this regulation in place in the US, it was kind of easier to sell in the US. But that's because the way customers and enterprise behave and buy those new technology and innovative technology is different. But the good news is that I moved back to Paris a year ago, and now things are starting to take off again in Europe. So it's an in between. Regulation is a bit better in Europe, but you know, customer facing and the behavior of big companies towards innovation is a bit easier in the US today. for us.
Really, really interesting words. I mean, usually we, sometimes the critics of the EU, you tend to say that the overregulation of the EU will stifle innovation, will not allow companies to grow. In your case, with the BVLS and the stuff that you do, it was easier to do it in the EU because it was regulated, it was clear how to do it, and in the US, you were not able to start? You were still waiting on some time?
Yeah, exactly. We were able to do small stuff, but for like a large and very bold operations, it was not possible to do in the US. There are still a lack of, I would say, harmonization in Europe, which makes it hard for us to go in certain country. I would say, for example, in Czech Republic, in Poland, in France, it's kind of good, the regulation, but in some countries like Germany, it's a bit harder, you know, so it's not very easy to evolve and to grow in such a heterogeneous context, I would say. But still, you know, this good regulation in EU has been very good for, and most of the leading drone companies in commercial use are from Europe today.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. So Cyril, you are, so we see that Benjamin's company is like 9 years already in the making, Mate's company, a little bit more, 11, 12 years. What is the case with Shark Robotics? Are you still at some kind of early stage? You've made some really big fame with helping to take out the fire at the Notre Dame Cathedral. How are you doing? How is your work? How are you expanding at this point, being an innovative European startup that relies on AI and other advanced technologies?
Yes, thank you, Jane. Shark Robotics is currently a French SME which developed unmanned system, and the main goal is to keep humans safe. So for me, as a co-founder of Shark Robotics, three main reasons actually explain the Shark success, if we can name that. The first one for us is the short loop engineering. I mean, for every robot development, we integrate from the real beginning the return of experience of the operators. And this is very essential because we implement firemen, soldiers, operators from oil and gas, general industry. And the end user experience is the key point of the engineering process. Because this kind of guys knows perfectly their job with plenty of operational experience. So if you put them around the table with engineers, you would be surprised by how this can be this kind of process can be efficient. Because you know the lack in the robotics is the lack of efficiency on the ground. Because as an example, when I was in the army in the special forces, we saw several times robotic solution interesting on the paper made by laboratories. But at the end, when you deploy them, this kind of solution on the ground, they were not adapted at all to the operational needs. So the end user is the key point. The second one is to be always focused on new innovative robots. We develop at Shark at least 4 new robots are designed each year, and then we test in real operation directly with the final users. And the third one is the high quality level robots, but manufactured locally. In Shark, we manage all the production line from the R&D office, the manufacturing, the assembly line, the customers training, and of course the robot maintenance after delivery. And I think especially during these difficult times, I mean during the COVID-19 period, this crisis demonstrated the real importance to have the production locally in Europe, okay? So thanks to these choices, we won in December an American award for technology, and in March 2020, we were able to develop in 3 weeks a sanitizing robot to fight COVID-19. And this robot is designed, for example, to decontaminate 20,000 square meters in 3 hours. And today we won contracts in Europe, but also beyond the Europe borders, because we provide better proven robotic solution based on a high quality level in order to fight, the Chinese competitors.
But yes, I mean, your robots, if they come in contact with those humans, and you have even, so they are a full part member of this Marseille or Paris firefighting squad. So in my view, these are almost government contracts, right? How much would you say the contracts with like government official, be it the firefighting squad or the police squad or the military, or how much did that influence the growth of your company? And did it come at a critical stage for your company?
Yes, you're right. Security and defense sector is approximately 50% of our revenue. And after that, we work with public industries and civil industries like companies from the CAC 40, okay, like Total, Areva, Orano. But most part of our experience is the return from the operators, from the firemen, the military, the soldiers, and we learn from them. And we were capable to deploy real solution, efficient solution on the ground. And with that, we can win contract, not especially in Europe, but also in the USA, also in Asia, in Middle East.
Perfect. So, Mr. Whelan, when we hear these stories, that we know, for example, that Tesla in the US has been largely, promoted with government money. We know that, for example, in the US, there is this, especially in Silicon Valley, there is this approach that the military or the defense industry always kind of, stimulates the innovation because they give out these big tenders and they ask anybody to apply for them, and the people get paid for those prototypes that they deliver. So what is the EU's approach? What is the EU's view on promoting innovation and getting young startup entrepreneurs just like these ones to get motivated and produce stuff and innovate new models of doing business, products or services?
Thanks. And there is no silver bullet on these things. I think the stories we've just heard, which are three quite different stories, already tell you that there's something in the German saying, success has many fathers. I think that's often understood to mean that everyone claims the credit when a success takes place, but it also means there are a lot of different preconditions to success. Maybe a starting point is to be positive about the levels of innovation in Europe. We have brought out last week the latest edition of the European Innovation Scorecard, which shows, of course, you can always discuss how these things are compiled, but I think they will always tell you a fundamental truth that innovation ecosystems in Europe as a whole are pretty good. On the metrics we use, they are actually a bit better in aggregate than the US or China, for example. You have a lot of variation across Europe, that's normal. Countries that are leading on digital indicators tend also to lead on innovation indicators. But we have a lot of things going in Europe that I think we need to play to. One of them is perhaps not a DARPA or similar military programs, as you just mentioned, but we have an increasingly well-resourced research and innovation framework. We've just proposed a massive increase in that for our next financing period for Horizon Europe, with increasing focus on innovation through the European Innovation Council. The recovery program that we have just proposed for Europe will massively focus on two major transitions that need to be driven by innovation and will drive innovation, namely the green and digital transitions. We're concentrating a lot more on one of the frequently denounced problems in Europe, namely the financing gap from startup to scale up, with increased resources in particular for the European Investment Fund to help private investors, support private investors go into that space. And looking more specifically at, let's say, the AI and digital space, we identified already 2 years ago in proposing a new program called the Digital Europe program, a number of factors that we think need to work together. Massively increased investment in the building blocks of AI, of high-performance computing going towards quantum, in advanced skills. So we certainly need a lot more basic digital skills in Europe, will be bringing out a paper on skills generally in Europe this week, a new action plan, but also advanced skills, university chairs in very specialized IT disciplines, for example, and much greater focus on pooling the data that we have in Europe.
It sounds like all of these very interesting initiatives that we can also find online, and they all look and sound really interesting, like really, really interesting, because they address all the most important issues. They address issues like, how am I supposed to get funding for my early startup? How am I going to bring, my product to a different level? But I just wanted to ask, so we have the unique opportunity with the people here. So Cyril, for example, you are at an early stage. Have you ever used any of those grants or any of those programs? Were you able to go into any of these things to be able to use them actively in your business and grow your company that way?
Unfortunately, Jane, to be honest, no, not at all. Because we were not notified in the SME landscape, European SMEs landscape. And for us, this is kind of a lack, because if you take an example, for example, in the US country, for the USA, they know perfectly their own landscape of AI, robotics, and robotic startup and SMEs. Thanks to a dedicated process, they are capable to identify each SMEs, each startup in the country, to find them and to say, okay, we will support you and we will help you to grow, okay? Few years ago, if you take the European Defense Agency take the lead to create the European Defense Technological Industrial Base, to identify the defense companies. And I think, from my point of view, it could be good if the European Union should do the same process for AI and robotics companies. Once the notification is made, the European Commission has to support them to find funding and also to win contracts, especially to win contracts in Europe and beyond borders.
Mate, but when you started out very early and very young. How long did it take before you were able to say, now I feel like I have been helped out, I have been nourished and cherished, I have been able to use some grants, some programs, this helped me a lot? Do you have to wait for like years or months, or how was it in your case?
Where do I take my diplomacy now? So we are a technology startup with 400 people in R&D. We have invested more than 100 million euros in the development of our products in a country that is one of the last in terms of investment in R&D and in innovation by patents, field, and so on. We have paid something like 17 million euros of taxes so far, 17, and we have received something like 2 million euros of government incentives and something like 2.5 million of EU funding in our whole history. We have, of course, tried to use as much as we could, like also in terms of loans and so on. Some of them really helped us in our history. But, I think people have this false image, especially in these new EU countries where, there's a whole sack of money just waiting for you somewhere, like European money. It's going to solve real problems, like why are you not taking EU money and so on. I think we should be much more like US, where where they have created their ecosystem with, angel investors, early VC funding, growth capital, private equity and IPOs. That's how it should work. Like, I have the feeling like people expect too much here from the EU and this, money that just appears from nowhere, and that they waste effort and energy and time on that instead of building their businesses. And that has kind of been my approach. Like, I focused on getting funding from investors rather than from the government. And it worked luckily for us, because I don't think that you should or can expect a lot from EU funding. Of course, it enables collaboration and so on. It's not just money, but it takes a lot of effort, a lot of management effort, a lot of management time to do that. And I think that effort and time is very scarce when you build a company, and you should use that effort and time somewhere else. That's my view.
Yes, okay, but so yeah, you already answered kind of my questions, but Benjamin, so you now said, and we already kind of realized, having BVLOS regulated in the EU helped you a lot because you were able to start your business, go to a different EU market, and without any difficulties get the licenses you need to get your unmanned drones flying everywhere and collecting data and stuff like that. But other than that, have you been able to use any sort of help or tenders? Have you worked for the defense industry in the EU or anything else?
Yes, with I would say different kind of success. So sometimes with grants for fundings, we had a great success, and we've been able to meet like other European institutes and other European companies with whom we're still working today. So it's been very good and very productive from this standpoint. Sometimes there has been some tenders, especially, I would not name any organization, but from a European organization that were very good and very adapted to what we were offering. Unfortunately, due to rules of like having different companies from different countries in Europe, we've been kicked out. But I mean, that's the game, and maybe for some other project those kind of rules helped us, so it's hard to tell. But for us it's been pretty good, and we're still looking for fundings, even though we're like 200 people in the company. This is still something that for us helps us like kickstart projects we may have never done without those types of grants. So this is something that we look as still as being pretty helpful, and I know that there have been some things set up like for post-COVID crisis as well that we're looking into today. So for us, it's been pretty helpful.
So, Mr. Whelan, when you hear these stories, and I think like these are not new stories, it's usual stories where we have on the one hand, a very bureaucratic culture of policymakers that needs to be like that. And it's always kind of tends to think of how could we help the industry? How could we help the entrepreneurs? And then we think of laws and policies, and then we put them in production, and then we set in front of those entrepreneurs a lot of paperwork to be filled out, many checks and many regulations to be respected. And at the end of the day, we say, we're going to get you this money, or we're going to help you in this way for you to grow. Now we hear that this, sometimes it works, as I would say, if you come from when we heard the story from Benjamin, and we hear the story from Mate, they had to grow to a certain level and the number of people that they could accommodate all of this extra work that had to be done for them to be able to use and bear the fruits of these policies. But what, in your view, and in your mandate especially, I know you've been very vocal about it, what is it that the EU can do differently, that all of these procedures and all of these things are much easier, and they go hand in hand with the mindset of an entrepreneur, innovator trying to build his company that doesn't have too much time to solve bureaucratic loopholes. He just wants to know if the thing that he does delivers value and he can get some money for it, or some contracts for it, or any other help to help him, move to different markets, or any other thing that would grow his company. Mr. Whelan, you are muted.
Excuse me. My mic here is not muted, so must be.
All good.
You hear me?
All good.
Great. Okay. A couple of things. First, of course, when the EU acts, we have to justify our added value relative to what our member states are doing, for example, in terms of there being an additional dimension. So things like multi-country consortia are the sort of things that are part of what the EU drives towards, so that we get better innovation links and research links across countries. Of course, that can, and rules like it, or rules for financial controls, can impose overheads, which we're constantly trying to simplify and resolve, but will never be completely wished away. What is perhaps a very important development in EU funding practice in the last decade or so is the extent to which we're trying to activate market mechanisms. That means on the very process that I think it was Mate mentioned, moving from angels to VC to growth cap and so on up the chain, we're trying to use EU money in order to build private markets there. So you will often be encountering VC in Europe with a completely private face, which is enabled with investment guarantees from the European Investment Fund, for example. So there you can have, of course, a somewhat more fluid, market-oriented decision-making by investment managers. More generally, because I don't want to just talk about funding, the point made by Benjamin about how regulation can be pro-innovation is, of course, not an automatism. There can be good and bad regulation, but we do invest a lot in Europe in impact assessing, in consulting, in preparing regulatory initiatives in order to make sure that they do not have an innovation constraining effect. Now, you will always have a phenomenon where you have countries with different starting points. For example, Germany and France were mentioned as being in different places on drone regulation at a certain moment. When you try to harmonize things in order to have a genuine single market for the product or the activity in question, you end up having to do sometimes more complicated compromises than we would like, but hopefully with the outcome that everyone then has a level playing field to roll out their products in a much bigger market.
What would you like to see happen? So let's say in the next 1 or 2 years, with all the initiatives that you have planned out and carefully selected, what would you like to see? What is kind of your KPI and measurement where you would say the things that we have done have truly helped Europe to be a more digital environment?
Well, if we take the specific area of AI, because we've KPIs for many things, we have set ourselves a target to get investment levels in Europe to 20 billion a year. Now, that's not EU money, that's EU money with national money, but predominantly also private investment across the whole space. So from the really heavy infrastructures like supercomputers and major data processing capacity to investment in the embedding of AI systems in hardware, which is something we're particularly good at in Europe. And I think your three.
Yes, you'll probably need to connect back. But okay, let's go. Once we cover the economic issues, can we go back to the AI issues there? I would like to ask Mate, so when you started out, you were not an AI company, I'm guessing.
That's a very...
Mr. Whelan, are you back? You're back with us, Mr. Whelan.
Am I now back with you? I was asked to refresh. Am I back with you?
You look refreshed.
Yeah, great. I don't know when you lost me.
No, so the only thing, and I asked, so in terms of, and we will switch now from the economic recovery point to more AI-related issues. And the fact is, how much does AI play a role, in your view or the Commission's view, on the economic recovery of the European Union?
Our immediate time plan, we all wish for the V-shaped recovery, a quick bounce back. So, I'm not going to exaggerate the extent to which, in the space of a year or two, the AI industry in Europe is going to have a statistically significant part in that. But what we do want our recovery investments to do is not just get us quickly back to where we were, but to be transformational. So we would see investment in AI capacity and digital capacity generally as a major way of future-proofing the European economy, building in more resilience and sustainable growth capacity.
What can the Commission do? What can the EU do to promote such, boosting innovation? What are the actions? What can we do?
Well, our major proposal in terms of the weight of money involved is the so-called recovery facility, which is, you're aware of the debate about grants and loans. It would be predominantly grants to countries that have been most heavily hit. But that is not just a blank check. The whole idea is that member states should develop national programs to fill gaps in their growth potential. And we will be fully expectant to see major digital elements there. Obviously, not everyone can reach into the same areas of specialism. Countries have different comparative advantage. Some will have a strong manufacturing sector, and the digitization of that, the introduction of AI there, will be something we would expect to see. Others may be looking more at digitization of their services sector, be it tourism or others. So we don't assume we have the master plan for everyone in Brussels, but we do think that national recovery programs without digital in them are not going to point towards transformational recovery.
Okay. So yeah, let's get back to the question of AI. Mate, when you started out, you had probably no AI department in your garage in 2009.
No.
I believe it's a different case right now. Can you just give us like a short overview of when was the time when you noticed and you realized that AI is going to become a major part of your business and that you definitely need to have like a dedicated department for all the things that you need?
Yeah, if we had an AI department in 2009, we will be a several billion euro company at the moment, I guess. We are close to being a unicorn right now, but we would have been, I guess, several times over a unicorn if we started in 2009 with this. Our focus in the beginning was on electrification, and still is. Our focus is still electrification, but we have for the last 3.5 years an AI department in the company who is developing autonomous driving technologies, and we use it also for other things like vehicle dynamics and so on. It can be applied to a lot of, a lot of areas. Automotive, for me, automotive, it fascinated me always because I think the car is the most complex product that you can make, or let's say the most, it's not just complexity, it's also refinement and design. For example, if you build a satellite, of course it's complex. It needs to work in a harsh environment and so on, but it doesn't need to look beautiful, or you don't care about the haptics and so on. A car is combining everything, all the human knowledge, all the technologies like material sciences, simulations, and so on. AI is becoming a very important part of lots of systems in the car, not just autonomous driving. So, for example, the battery algorithms or algorithms for controlling the vehicle, distributing torque, and so on. So we are using it in many areas, but why I started to work on that is because I realized that the car industry is going to change completely. And the idea is, so, electrification, it seems like a huge deal, but, I'm talking often in the keynotes to managements of big car companies, and there's one thing that they are missing, I think. They have the feeling that they're in this huge transition in electrification, and that's on the top of their mind. They are changing from combustion to electric cars. But if you look at it really, 100 years ago, all of these suppliers made parts for them. Like 100 years ago, they were making spark plugs and exhausts and stuff like that. The car companies would buy the parts from the suppliers. Even some of them are still the same, like Bosch and Michelin and so on, same suppliers like today. And the OEMs, the car companies, were building cars. They were selling them to dealerships. The dealerships sold them to end customers, and the end customers used them and serviced them in service stations and so on. Today, 100 years later, the same suppliers are just making different parts. Instead of the ignition system, they might make an inverter for electric motor or an electric motor, whatever. The car companies still buy the parts. They assemble the car. By the way, 75% of added value is not happening at the OEM, it's happening at the supplier. So the supplier supplies 75% of the value of the car. The OEM assembles it into a car, sells it to the dealership. The dealership sells it to the end customer. Now it's an electric car, not a combustion engine car. The only thing that changes is that you don't go to a gas station, you go to a charging spot. So everybody else stays in their comfort zone. The suppliers stay in their comfort zone, the OEM stays in the comfort zone, the dealerships, nothing changes. But with the new paradigm of mobility, where you don't have owners anymore, you have users. You have also completely different players. You have the AI provider, the driver provider, which can be the same company like the ride-hailing company, or it can be a separate company. So for example, Uber might have their own AI, or maybe Lyft will use Waymo, whatever. Then you have the car company who is making the car for the mobility service provider. But it's going to be like buses today. Buses today are not bought, from the shelf. They are tenders where the bus companies are applying. So there'll be a tender for 100,000 cars for Waymo, for Google. So where's the differentiation? You will not care anymore about speed, about driving dynamics, about handling, these kind of things, because you don't care about these things when you go into a train today or into a bus. You don't care who made the bus. You just care to be comfortable, to be clean, and so on. It's going to be different things. So a lot of car companies will face a lot of challenges there, and they are still all focused on electrification, and that's our bread and butter. Our bread and butter is making electric powertrains and batteries for other car companies, but I see it, to be honest, as a totally temporary thing, and it's just a small change, in my opinion, in the industry, while the next change will completely turn the industry on its head. Not just the industry, it's one of the largest industries in the world, one of the largest industries in Europe. It will turn the economies of many countries on its head.
So basically your answer that your quest for AI comes from the fact that you realize that the automotive industry is changing rapidly, and that AI will play a major role, because not only will it change the technological way of cars that are being built, but also the whole sociological phenomenon around it, how they will be used, how they will be bought, and how they will be sold. Interesting. And so, Cyril, how big of a role does AI play in your company? Have you started as an AI company, or you started as, what was the deal with you?
We are at an early stage about the AI because we develop robotic solution, and we really want to keep the main in the loop. I mean, before the analysis and to any decision, because we are working in specific environment. For example, the firefighter know perfectly the situation, so he know if he has to go on the left, on the right, if he need to first extinct a fire, to evacuate the wounded persons. So we try to develop simple AI bricks to integrate in the robot. So for example, you have the follow me mode, the go back to positions, the simple things that will keep a human resources, and you want that the robot will do by himself. So for example, the simple thing who will support the troops on the ground, and you don't have to think about it. So for example, there is an operator and the robot will follow him. Okay, this is the simple bricks, because we have to take care about this kind of development of AI. It's very important, of course, and every customers now, of course, ask us about a remotely controlled robot. But every customers now on the market, and is growing, are asking for AI bricks to integrate in the robotic solution to support the human resources, and to say, okay, what I will deploy 2 guys, if one robot can do the same, I will deploy 1 guy, 1 robot, and he will do another mission. So I save money, I save time, and I save resources. That's the main idea.
Okay. Benjamin, you started as a company that provided both the hardware, so a very unique patented fixed-wing drones, along with your own platform that is AI-based. Now, recently, you made a deal with DJI, where they will be using their drones for commercial applications on your platform. Can you tell us a bit on how you view AI and how you cultivate it within your company?
Yes. So we started AI from the beginning when we designed the drones. So it was AI built in the machines. And about 2 years after we created the company and we started to sell the drones, we realized that those drones were capturing a new type of data. So mostly high resolution images at scale. And our clients, they were having a hard time in managing all those type of data, processing it, and getting insights out of it. So we decided to launch a platform, which is a cloud-based platform, which is called Delair.ai, in which there is a lot of AI in order to help our clients classify all those data, aggregate it with other type of data, and analyze it in order to get information out of it. For example, when we work with a utility, they would use our AI-based platform in order to aggregate millions and millions of photos of their poles, of their power lines, and detect automatically some defects on it. Same thing with oil and gas company. We work same thing in agriculture, where we detect disease based on thousands and thousands of images. And it's interesting, if I go back to your initial questions to me regarding the difference between the US and Europe, it's interesting the difference that we see of approach between, I would say, Europe and US, China, and other countries in which we work. So our platform, for example, is a cloud-based platform. So it runs on the cloud, but it's very cloud agnostic. So it can run on AWS, on Azure, on whatever cloud service provider. When we work with a US-based company in energy or transportation and everything that is kind of critical, they push very hard for our software to be onto their cloud. So whether they have chosen AWS, Google, Microsoft, doesn't matter, but they want us to install our software on their cloud. We have seen the same thing in China, and the same thing in Saudi, for example. We worked with a large company in Saudi. They have a national cloud service provider that they are using, and they wanted us to install our software on their own cloud service provider. While in Europe, I mean, this is something that we discuss with customer, but it's not as critical as what we've seen in other countries. And what we've seen in Europe is that companies and even in energy, etc., not only they accept to have a US-based cloud service provider, but they also don't put as an initial requirement to start working with us to put our software onto their cloud. And I think it's a very interesting difference of approach. So for us, I would say it's more business friendly in Europe. But when we look at the criticality of data security, etc., I don't know.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult, especially like there are always two ways to approach these things. And we often are witnesses, and we saw it from Madame Vestager's talk, that we talk about the abilities and the potential of AI, but then we always kind of ask the question, what could go wrong? And we definitely need to regulate this. And this is where when I'm looking at your three companies, and I'm hearing that Mate has a hypercar that can go from 0 to 60 in a matter of 1 to 0.5 seconds or whatever it is. Mate, please correct me if I'm saying stupid stuff here. And then Cyril is making robots that can disinfect or you put out fires. You're making drones that are flying all around. If we would ask the question, what could go wrong? Well, a lot of things could go wrong with all of your, the things that you do. But how, Mr. Whelan, where do we make the difference of saying, not what could go wrong, but what if something like that could really go well, and we could have a European product or a European company having global success, exporting those products or services worldwide?
Well, I hope it's already getting up and going from what I heard from at least the three co-panelists. They're already reaching well beyond Europe. I mean, on the what can go wrong piece, I think Vice President Vestager pretty well captured it, that I think a bedrock of predictable regulation of, for example, what a company could be liable for, what sort of damage caused by an AI system could end up being a bill for them or for their insurers. I think the more clarity we can give on that, the better it is. Now, that involves a lot of judgment. It's not a simple quantitative equation that you can do on that. And that's why we have done this very broad-based consultation on a regulatory framework for AI. But the idea is not to regulate it because it's AI. The idea is to capture risks that are sufficiently significant that they need a regulatory framework to establish people's responsibilities. I think ultimately for businesses that will trade on not only the quality and ruggedness and intelligence of their products in the field, but on their reputation, that is actually potentially an asset if we get it right.
Okay, so guys, do you feel like, Mate, being from the EU, having to, so you're using AI within your company, within your products, you must comply with the different rules that are present within the EU. Do you feel like your AI or your products are better for that? Do you think like we're more advanced than other territories where the regulation is maybe not that hard?
Really good question. You know, I believe that China is really, when I look at the regulations and the way the regulators frame things, you can really see that there's people who really think strategically, long-term, and really understand their stuff, and having their own interests in at first place. So, for example, battery regulations, it's incredible how well structured they are, how technically capable and detailed they are in China. And I see Europe lagging behind there. In terms of AI and autonomous driving, it's one of the biggest questions in the world, I would say, and something that will really determine how things go. The regulations everywhere are extremely slow. They are still focused on, how would I say, the intermediate step, like to enable some kind of driver assistance systems. So for example, that the car can help you on the highway, that you don't have to keep your hands on the wheel and stuff like that. We are thinking beyond that, and a lot of others are working beyond that, that you don't need the steering wheel anymore. So like, it's impossible for you right now to build a car without the steering wheel. For example, it's also impossible right now to build a car or to even have any idea when it could be accepted that the car is not complying with some regulations that are exclusively there just for driving. So for example, a car has to have certain view angles. So the driver has to be in a position to see, for example, the traffic lights and stuff like that. In an autonomous car, that's not relevant anymore. You could design a car very differently if you wouldn't have to do those things. So for example, an autonomous car should have the lights in the right position because it's signaling to other people, but the passengers in the car should all be passengers. There shouldn't be a driver anymore. So you don't need the steering wheel, you don't need the brakes, like the pedals and so on. You don't need the sitting position, you don't need the views. It can be very different.
So you say that for the Tesla Model X, the SUV electrical hypercar that has no rear view mirrors would be difficult to build, innovate, and produce in the EU because it probably would not comply with some regulations that says rear view mirrors are necessary or stuff like that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's the same in the US. The US has similar regulations. The Tesla, for example, it complies with the regulations. Audi is the first one who now has cameras instead of mirrors, but that's really small stuff. So I think that's an opportunity for a region or a country to be really like progressive and to be the playground of this huge industry, to say, okay, we are going to allow the first deployment of autonomous vehicles, and this is the regulation that we are doing specifically for that. It's being worked on, but it's super early, and we are also, that's part of the reason why I'm spending some time in Brussels and also with our regulators here and with other countries where we are discussing to work on robotaxis and so on. But it's really in the early stage, and you can really see that, unfortunately, the regulations are really behind the technology. And this will be a big issue because, autonomous driving will unlock, phones didn't change just Apple and Nokia and so on, the phone industry. They changed our lives, everything in the last 20 years. And I really think that, a capitalist society has to always grow. And with this, it grew because you could always work. You could work wherever. You didn't have to be in your office. And the next growth, in my opinion, will be because you are going to get billions of hours back instead of being stuck in traffic and driving, you will have people being productive. Productive in the sense that they will consume content from the car, like videos or stuff like that, or they will work in that time that they have.
Yeah. And have a date or have a lunch or something.
Yeah, or eat, whatever. Sleep, doesn't matter. You have your time back. And plus, it will be less injuries, less death, less pollution, better usage of the infrastructure of roads and so on. So the regulators who need to unlock that have to move if they want to unlock that potential, because it's there. Like, we can have it very soon. The technology is almost there, but unfortunately, the regulation is slow.
Of course. But Benjamin, so we heard also from your talk that, for example, the fact that you are a world leader in BVLOS technology, and the fact that the EU has regulated some of those things, and you made your technology compliant to those regulations, was that part of your worldwide success?
Yes, but to be fully transparent and honest, it's European countries who have regulated it, but not yet EU. I mean, EU is starting to do it, but it was a European country one by one. So it is still a very heterogeneous market. But for sure, those regulations that appeared in several countries in Europe helped us a lot and kind of created the standards for the future worldwide regulation, I would say, because now industry leaders are respecting those standards that have been set up in those very early on regulations.
Perfect. Cyril, so when you now go and you look for money from VC funds or anywhere else, and you say that you are a European company that respects and complies all the EU regulations, that you made your software and hardware to be very compliant and put humans in the loop to create a trustworthy system, does that in any way, give you a better position, a negotiation position?
It's a large question, but yes and not, because if you compare to the US, the US market is very interesting because they move fast and the regulation is very adapted to the market. Of course, like Benjamin said, in Europe, it's quite heterogeneous, so it's difficult to harmonize the regulation. So when you see the US market, even in American companies are famous and very well known for AI and robotic solution. You have also plenty of famous and talented companies in Europe. So we saw that, for example, we were targeting this year, but one of the best US company, Boston Dynamics, in robotics to develop specific solution to fight COVID-19, because they didn't have the necessary skills in their own territory. So in this way, they come to us because we have a certain process of ethics, and due to regulations. And in the robotics field, everything is just the beginning. I mean, there is no the same regulation like in the automotive. We are just starting, so we can go in every direction. Before, if you compare Russia to US to Europe to Chinese, every single country is going its own direction. So some of them weaponize the robot. In Europe, we say no. In France, especially, we say no. We don't want to weaponize the robot and mixed with AI. So it's very difficult for them to find our position. But for one sure, the main goal is to keep the human on the loop to avoid any mistake, any problem in the future. So the ethics and regulation is I think it's very important. And the European Union need to have the lead in that way to show, we will do innovative solution, but with respect of ethics and regulations.
Perfect. And now, before we go to the questions of the audience, I have one last question for Mr. Whelan. So for a young AI wannabe entrepreneur, somebody who's just starting in the field, and he's kind of weighing in, should I pack my bags? Should I go to the US, get a job, find capital right there on the street, probably Silicon Valley, they're throwing it out of the bag immediately, or should I move to China, or should I stay in the EU? What would you say would be, from the EU's perspective, what would be the word or the reason for them to definitely stay and build out their businesses here and to bet on AI within the EU?
economic, it's a question of playing to your strengths. Europe has strengths, including in this area, and we've been hearing about them. We are well rooted in very respected manufacturing prowess. We have a good, predictable regulatory framework, even if slower than people would like. We have ethical systems that are trusted by others as well as by ourselves. So there is a scope to build companies, hyperscalers even in Europe, that play to those strengths.
And let's go to the questions then and see how we could then, let's go to the first one. So someone named Božidar, question for all. How you introduced AI into your company? Some of you came from AI world, but not all. I think we basically pretty much answered that question. Marcus, you mentioned the different regulations niveau in different countries. What makes the regulation in Germany harder to cope with than in other countries? My goal to my question is to understand how we can improve our regulation procedures. It's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, Mr. Whelan, as well. We heard from Benjamin's case. So there is EU regulations, but then there are individual EU country regulations. And what is your view on that? How can they be like, how do we see these individual things from country to country and then on an EU level?
Yeah, I mean, this is not so different from the US or other, let's say, political structures that have different levels of government and decision making. In general, the member states are free to regulate things that they see as posing a danger or where they see an opportunity, perhaps to open up for new technologies, as has been mentioned earlier. The EU rarely intervenes first because we often benefit from seeing different approaches in member states. But if you let that go too far, then you end up with the sort of fragmentation that, for example, Benjamin was mentioning. So the question of when to intervene and try to harmonize before you have a complete patchwork, but without acting so quickly that you're not too sure what you're doing and you don't have consensus with your member states who are major contributors to the legislative process, that involves quite a bit of judgment. I think in AI, I've been looking at some of the comments in the comment bar. We don't see ourselves regulating very detailed rules for AI. There is so much that we don't yet know. What we see is ways of framing responsibilities. And we have rules on responsibility for harm and for safety, some of which go back decades, if not even centuries, and have built up over time and which are based on principles. We want to see how across Europe we can get common principles on how to address risks posed by autonomous cars, when a human has to be in the loop, when a certain level of risk is reached, for example. And we will not, I think, ever have a European definitive list of all those cases. It will be things that will still involve decision-making on individual cases as they arise.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Whelan, most of these questions are actually directed to you. So either I didn't even give you enough space and time, or
I'm either popular or unpopular.
So the question is from Kopčić 36 minutes ago. Is EU doing anything to promote and encourage small EU countries to be more independent in production of strategic technology, for example, medical devices? This is something, so Mate, would you say that you come from a small EU country?
4 million, yes.
Yeah, so Mr. Whelan, what would you say the EU does to encourage small EU countries, so not the big players, but the small ones, to kind of, bet on one part of the AI game?
Yeah, I mean, I see the question as posed relates to the dramatic experience we had with COVID, with some panicky responses by certain member states to shortages of key medical equipment. Our response to that was first to insist that any sort of restriction is proportionate and that the borders stay open. And secondly, to do a lot of work with industry as well as member states to ramp up production of things that were in shortage, of ventilators and masks and material like that. Now, if we that was in a crisis scenario. If we turn to the long-term strategy, I don't think we're talking about self-sufficiency of any European country, big or small, in the sort of technologies we're talking about. We're talking about everyone having their place in the value chain or the ecosystem. And among the sort of things we are doing to make sure that smaller and perhaps also poorer countries get to play their role is, for example, promoting use of cohesion funds for what we call digital innovation hubs. So places where you can get access to specialist advice within your country, big or small, in order to help with facets of your startup which you perhaps can't immediately master at once.
Thank you. It brings me to the second question, which is directly, it follows this one. It's been asked by someone named Dominic an hour ago, and it says, how important are digital innovation hubs to promote AI for local industry? So in your view, very much important, I guess.
Yeah, we see it as important. Now, it's a process that is not fully established. We have, if I remember well the numbers, there are about 200 in existence. We're aiming for roughly 500, so one per region. But we see them both important generally and as important to have a certain amount of specialism within countries, including on AI, as I mentioned.
Okay. And there's also one other question for you. Very popular, Mr. Whelan. So often EU is looking at the USA as the obvious go-to market and development area for our companies. Don't you think that partnering with Chinese players could accelerate the development of AI usage and innovation from Europe?
Yeah, I don't think the EU has its list of good or bad partners in this area. What we would wish with anyone who is partnering with EU companies selling into the EU market, whatever the commercial relationship is that they respect our legal norms and our values when they are addressing our market. That has a very particular relevance in some very sensitive areas like facial recognition software in public places, to cite one example. But there are plenty of commercial collaborations in high-tech areas that are possible with US, Chinese, Indian, Japanese, South Korean partners.
So the EU doesn't.
Pardon me?
The EU doesn't discriminate partners. It's definitely, you're looking at the value that it's to be.
The question, I think, was about commercial partnerships. Yeah. We have an open market and our companies are free to make a lot of different types of partnerships. We're obviously very sensitive to foreign companies that are, for example, benefiting from excessive subsidies. We're sensitive in a certain number of areas where security issues arise. So none of this is without limits, but we are an open market.
Does any of our panelists have Chinese partners? Mate, do you work or cooperate with some partners in China?
Yeah, our biggest shareholder outside of, except for me, is a Chinese company called Camel, the largest battery manufacturer in China of lead-acid batteries. Our experiences with working with China have been mixed. I mean, it's like everywhere else. We have, good companies, bad companies. With a lot of companies, we have very positive experiences, but with many, we also have quite negative experiences. Working with China being a very different culture, I would say people need to be careful, like with most other collaborations, but in general, we have a positive feeling.
And the rest of the guys, Benjamin, have you worked in China? Have you moved to that market as well?
Yes, actually, it's been our biggest market before we opened the US. So very into innovation, and I mean, it's been pretty good for us. Before, I would say the US-China war, And also we have a big partnership with DJI, as you mentioned, who is the worldwide leader in prosumer drones, I would say. So we do work a lot with in China and with Chinese company outside China as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Cyril, did you have any experiences with China?
Yes, of course. We have a subsidiary, Shark Asia, who is working in Singapore and to deal with in China, because it's a huge market of 1 billion persons. So we can avoid them. So of course it's very important to promote and provide robotic solution over there. And also, like Mate said, you have to take care about this. This is a very special market and very huge market, quite like the same US, because so you have to take care, and it's a long process to came on this market.
Perfect. And I would like to use this opportunity as some closing words, especially in the context of the title, and that is the EU's economic recovery and the future for European AI. So, Mr. Whelan, what would you say, in a nutshell, would be the proper way to approach economic recovery in the EU, especially betting on AI?
I said it already. Play to your strengths.
That's it. Thank you very much for the message. Benjamin, what would you say? What is your view on how we can recover the economic situation in Europe post-corona?
Stay calm. I don't know.
Stay beautiful. Thank you, Benjamin. Cyril, from your point of view, what would you do? What do you think is the best way forward for Europe?
Produce locally.
Produce locally. Thank you very much. And Mate, from your point of view?
I think it's less of a deal than everybody thought. I thought that we'll have companies going bankrupt, everybody, and people losing their jobs in masses. At least here, it didn't happen in this way. And we are expanding like crazy and using the opportunities to snatch up people from other companies that are not doing so well. So for us, it's a great opportunity, and I hope other companies will be able to use that opportunity as well.
Great. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'm really happy. I'm sorry none of you was female, and we had some remarks regarding there. I would just like to inform everybody that we have 2 more upcoming panels, and that some of them will be more female skewed. So I'm sorry if it was not really gender appropriate for some of you. Thank you very much, dear attendees. I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and thank you for all the questions. There were way too many, so we were not able to answer all of them, but I think we picked up some of the most interesting ones. Now is the time for you to make the switch that I announced in the very beginning. So in the upper, in this corner, I think it's in this corner, you will see European AI Forum timestamp. If you click on that, there are 2 small arrows. You can switch to the next session. We will take a short break, and then we will continue on from there with some really nice keynote addresses from other EU policy officials, and also interesting panels on other interesting topics. Thank you very much for being with us. See you soon.
12:15.